Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Śrīvāsādi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kipasindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I think this is okay. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you very much for being here this evening. This program is very busy. So many classes, so much is happening, and I'm really honored that you're here and not on the beach. I have to get used to there not being a translation, because the translation is going on parallel. And first of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to our translators. I have a lot of experience in translating, and I know that it's a lot of effort and focus, concentration. So thank you so much for helping me to give this class this way, because I have a lot more time, because there is so much to say. Let's see what will fit into this class. I have 20 pages of notes, so let's see how we can go forward, and what we have time for and what we will not have time for. Just going to. Yes, this will help. So, as I said yesterday morning, that the discussion today will be about Śrīla Prabhupada introducing deity worship in the West. Deity worship is one of the core practices of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. For hundreds of years, it's played a central role both in the personal lives of devotees and in communities. And when Śrīla Prabhupada established ISKCON, he made sure that this wasn't left out. In the very constitution of ISKCON, he included it as one of the key purposes of the members. He said that to establish temples and to worship the deities of Radha Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is among the purposes of ISKCON, the tasks of its members. So Śrīla Prabhupada saw deity worship as a powerful way to awaken Krishna consciousness. He didn't just introduce it as a ritual, but brought it in as a transformational practice. Thank you. We know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally instructed Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami to establish deity worship in Vrindavan and to create centers where people could deepen their love for Krishna. Yesterday we spoke about why Śrīla Prabhupada established this institution, and its very name shows that the purpose is to achieve Krishna consciousness, love for Krishna. So Prabhupada saw himself as continuing that same mission that Lord Chaitanya gave to the Goswamis, but now on a global scale. So in my research, I looked at how Śrīla Prabhupada put this into action. And to understand his approach, we need to look at three things: what traditional deity worship actually involves, why Śrīla Prabhupada felt it's important to introduce it in the West, and how this practice helps to shape the international Krishna consciousness movement. So, of course, we were talking about sadhana bhakti in this camp, and when Rupa Goswami gives us the limbs of sadhana, 64 limbs. There are so many limbs of sadhana bhakti that connect to deity worship. So it is very relevant. Of course, in Turkey we don't have an established temple with installed deities yet. Hopefully someday in the future we will. Right now we don't, but you're all familiar with worshipping deities at home. Many of you have Gornitai deities, so I think the subject matter is very relevant to you as well. And of course also here we have on the altar a beautiful Sadhguru Mahaprabhu, Gornitai and Giriraj. So we see how it's part of our daily ritual. So deity worship, or the Sanskrit term for deity is murti, is a tradition that goes back thousands of years in India. And in our Gaudiya Vaishnava path, it's a natural, central part of devotional life. Devotee scholars came up with a Western term that reflects the Vaishnava view of God as polymorphic monotheism, or polymorphic bi-monotheism. I didn't put this up on the slide, but I'm sure you can grasp this concept. It's a perfect term to describe the Gaudiya Vaishnava understanding of divinity, of God. Polymorphic bi-monotheism. So I think we're all familiar with the term monotheism, which means worshipping one God. And then when we say polymorphic, morph means form. So polymorphic means that one God has many forms. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam says that the one Supreme Person reveals himself in unlimited ways. This is from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 40, Text 7. And yet others, those whose intelligence is pure, follow the injunctions of Vaishnava scriptures promulgated by you. Absorbing their minds in thought of you, they worship you as the one Supreme Lord manifesting in multiple forms. That's why we have Nrisimhadev, Lord Ramachandra, Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, so many other incarnations and manifestations of the Lord, different forms, but the same person. Brahma-saṁhitā explains this with a wonderful example. It says that when the flame of one candle is expanded to another candle and placed in a different position, it burns separately, and its illumination is as powerful as the original candles. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, expands himself in different forms as Vishnu, who is equally luminous, powerful, and opulent. Let me worship that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda. Govinda Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami. So the example here is that when you have a candle and you light another candle from it, it will also have the same light. So the same way, when Krishna expands in his different forms, they have the same power. So this is polymorphic. And the bi, so I said polymorphic bi-monotheism, the bi part refers to how God and his energies are inseparable. Shakti and Shaktiman. Shaktiman is the possessor of Shakti, and Shakti is usually translated as energy or potency. It's not a term that's so easily translatable. There are so many Sanskrit terms which don't have an English equivalent. We can just use so many words to describe it. So in our tradition, God is not just one. He appears in a divine pair, right? So we say Radha Krishna, or Lakshmi Narayana, or Sita Ram. So God is inseparable from his energy. So this is the bi part. So what is the term that's been coined to express the Gaudiya Vaishnava concept of God? What was the term? Yes, polymorphic bi-monotheism. Can we repeat this? Polymorphic bi-monotheism. Okay? So Vaishnava theology tells us that the all-powerful Supreme Person exists both in the eternal spiritual realm as well as in the material realm. He pervades all the material creation. He is present in every atom. But out of his mercy, he also agrees to appear in a physical form of material elements, which we call Arcā-avatara, or Arcā-vigraha, or Murti. Why is this happening? So that he can receive our service, even here in the material world. And we don't see the deity as a symbol or just a representation. We see the deity as Krishna himself, fully present. And this allows us to develop a real personal relationship with him. When we decorate the deity, we're actually decorating our own heart with Krishna consciousness. It brings our thoughts to him. Śrīla Prabhupada is very clear that worship of the deity is not idol worship. In a purport in the 4th canto, Prabhupada says that worship of the Arcā-vigraha is not idol worship. The Arcā-vigraha is an incarnation of the Lord in a form appreciable by a devotee. Therefore, devotees engage in the temple in the service of the Lord as Arcā-vigraha, a form made of stula, material objects such as stone, metal, wood, jewels, or paint. All of these are called stula, or physical representations. Since the devotees follow the regulative principle of worship, even though the Lord is there in his physical form, he's non-different from his original spiritual form. So Śrīla Prabhupada emphasizes that the Lord appears in this form, and when he appears in this form, it is no longer material. It looks like it's still made of metal, for example, or stone, but it is not material. Just like he often gives the example that when you have an iron rod and you put it into iron, what does Prabhupada say? What happens to the iron rod?
Fire.
It becomes like fire, right? So it takes on the quality of fire. So the same way when the Lord appears in the form of wood, metal, or stone, or even in the mind, the form becomes the Lord's real spiritual transcendental form. So there's no difference between Krishna's spiritual body and the deity. The challenge is that us as conditioned souls, we can't perceive spiritual form with our material eyes. So Krishna is very kind and makes it easier for us so that we can perceive him and we can see and touch him and serve him. Prabhupada introduced deity worship in ISKCON according to the Pañcharātrika system, the same process taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Vrindavan Goswamis. These scriptures explain how to install the deity, how to worship the deity properly, and Prabhupada showed that these principles apply to everyone regardless of background. Yesterday, Radha Govinda Prabhu used the word mlecha, right? So people who are not Aryans, or living outside of India, who have bad habits. So Prabhupada wanted to show that even these people can become qualified to worship the form of the Lord. And he emphasized that actually those scriptures that describe deity worship, these Pañcharātra scriptures, are more important than the Vedanta, because temple worship makes spiritual life very accessible, while the Vedanta has such philosophy that is very difficult for the people of this day and age to understand. So both Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, which are essential scriptures, highlight the process of deity worship. Krishna teaches about deity worship to Uddhava in the 11th canto. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also talks about deity worship when he's teaching Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And when Lord Chaitanya lists the 5 main limbs of bhakti, can we recall what are the 5 main limbs of bhakti? How does it start? What's the first one?
Chant holy name.
No, that would be the 9. So there is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasvedam. That's 9. Now we have another series which is 5. Rajavahini?
Living in a holy place, reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, chanting the holy name, and Arcanam'ın, so multi worship, and Saṅkīrtana.
Associating Sadhusanga.
Sadhusanga. So Sadhusanga, Nama Kirtana, Bhagavata Shravana, Mathura Vasa, Shri Murtira, Shraddhaya Sevana. So these 5 things, associating with sadhus, sadhu sangha, nama kirtan, chanting the holy name, Bhagavata Shravana, hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, living in Vrindavan, and serving the deity. So out of the 64 limbs of bhakti, Lord Chaitanya is emphasizing these so we can see that there is such a huge emphasis on deity worship. So what is the purpose of deity worship? According to our scriptures, deity worship makes God tangible and specific and allows a personal relationship with the divine. So through scriptural descriptions of Krishna, a devotee can actually see the Lord face to face and awaken their dormant Krishna consciousness. We incorporated ISKCON Hungary in 1990 officially, at the end of 1989. And Srila Sri Maharaj was the GBC at the time, and he very much wanted us to install deities, Gornitai deities in the beginning. In 1992 we installed Gornitai. And some devotees took part in the deity worship, others didn't. And at one point he expressed his disappointment that we have these deities here, but not everybody is taking part in deity worship, especially leaders. So he wrote a letter, which I would like to share with you, because it connects to, one, the importance of worshipping the deities, how much he's emphasizing its importance, and this point that I was saying, that deity worship makes Krishna very specific, very tangible. So this is the letter he wrote. Please put on the next meeting agenda a discussion about how very few of our leaders are actually doing deity worship. When so-and-so was the temple president, I told him to worship the deities, but they ignored it. I said the same thing to so-and-so and to other brahmanas. But it seems you are all such big preachers that you don't take seriously what your guru or the GBC tells you. I'm concerned because the devotees need deity worship. We have to make Krishna concrete, tangible. Otherwise, because of our speculative tendencies, everyone will just be trying to imagine who Krishna is and what he wants. Then the devotees will become weak. We are not liberated souls. So he's saying that if we don't worship the deity, when we worship the deity, everything is very specific. How he wakes up, how he eats, how he dresses, what he looks like, how he wants to be decorated. Everything is very specific. Otherwise, we just think of Krishna and we imagine something. This is not the end of the letter. The letter continues. Why are so many devotees eager to get married? Why are leaders arguing? Why is there a lack of funds? It's because there isn't enough focus on keeping Krishna at the center. Instead, there is self-centered motivation, my plan, my service, my preaching. Later it just becomes my wife, my house, my family, my next body. Anyone can do arati, cook for the deities once a week, dress them in the evening or put them to rest. Just do some small service regularly. I do it. Such and such Prabhu also does it. But you great leaders are all so advanced that you don't have to, because you are preachers. Clearly this is ironic. Maharaj uses this kind of a language to make a point, to emphasize the importance of taking part in deity worship and how much regularly worshipping the deity helps us to keep Krishna in the center of our life. If Krishna is and our altar is the center of our home, we can always remember that I am just the tenant in this house. The owner of the house is Krishna. Everything in his house is his property, and I'm his servant coming into this house to serve him. And I live in this house with this consciousness, manasa deho geho yokichumor, arpilutua padenanda kishore. Me, my house, my family members, they're all Krishna's property, and I'm just a servant. So by performing various rituals and offerings, reciting prayers to the deity and engaging in service, we can express our devotion to Krishna. And if we properly follow these rituals, our heart becomes purified, and deity worship helps a sadhaka rediscover and live their eternal identity as the servant of Krishna, developing attachment to him. This is next quote is from a lecture by Śrīla Prabhupada. Prabhupada says, Krishna is here in the temple, but he has come mercifully to be seen by you. Otherwise you're blind. You cannot see Krishna. But he has appeared as the Arcā-vigraha, so that you're accustomed to see wood and stone, so he appears in your visible form, but he is Krishna. He will understand, you will understand he is Krishna present when you have got enough love for him. This is the way. You increase your attachment, see Krishna in the temple, think of Krishna, and chant Krishna's name and offer obeisances to Krishna. These things you can teach even to the small children. They can be practiced to see Krishna and increase attachment for Krishna. That is wanted. So Śrīla Prabhupada established an international community to help people awaken their Krishna consciousness. And in one of his letters, he wrote that when a person serves the deities of Radha and Krishna according to the prescribed rules and regulations, their love for Krishna will naturally increase more and more. During the installation of Radha Gokulananda in London, Śrīla Prabhupada explained that the purpose of deity installation is to enable one to engage in Krishna's service 24 hours a day. So if I have my home and I have my deities and I identify as the servant of the deity in the house, every activity I perform is a service to the Lord of the house, to the deity, to Gornitai, right? I go to do my work, to earn money, to be able to serve the deity. I wake up, I bathe, I put on dhoti, kurta, sari, tilak, and I do arti, and I do the offering, and kirtan, and so many other things with which I worship the deity. All day, 24 hours a day, I can serve the deity. I can read Shastra to glorify the deity. I can speak with others about Krishna. So Prabhupada says it's an opportunity to serve Krishna 24 hours a day. On the purpose of deity worship in a 74 letter and in a lecture in 75, Prabhupada emphasized that the goal of deity worship is to fulfill Krishna's desire. Which desire? The one he mentions in the Bhagavad Gita 1865. He says, Manmana bhava madbhakto. He says, always think of me and become my devotee. So the constant sight of the deity helps create a natural impression of Krishna in the mind, so the devotee continually sees him in thought and remains Krishna conscious. So I'm sure many of you have the experience when you serve deities, then that impression stays in the mind. We remember them all day. And because the deity stands at the center of the temple and his service is complex, it requires cooperation. Now we have a few devotees who take care of the deities here. So it helps us to cooperate. It helps the relationship between devotees when we serve. Oh, who is cooking for the deity, and who is bringing the garland, and who is dressing, and who is making the offering. So it's strengthening the connection with each other and the connection with the divine. So when Prabhupada introduced deity worship, he aimed to preserve an ancient tradition, one that helps the spiritual growth of every individual and also that of the community. Now I'd like to talk a little about the form of the deity, because scripture describes many forms of Krishna and many forms of deities in Pancharatra literature, but the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition focuses mainly on Radha Krishna, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, and Gaur-Nitai. Śrīla Prabhupada established the worship of Radha Krishna and Lord Chaitanya as central in ISKCON. And Radha Krishna worship is the heart of our tradition. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself is a combined form of Radha and Krishna, and by worshipping their deities we begin to build that eternal relationship. So Prabhupada explained that although we worship Radha and Krishna on the altar, Radha and Krishna eternally in Vrindavan can only be worshipped with a pure heart and when one has rag or deep attachment to them. So Prabhupada said that we have the form of Radha and Krishna on the altar, but in the beginning, until we have this deep rag, we worship based on vaidhi or regulation. Now Krishna says, Ye yatamam prapadyante tam satvaiva bhajamyaham. I reciprocate with everyone based on how they approach me. So if we approach Krishna based on vaidhi, based on regulated principles, then he reciprocates with us in that mood. That's why Śrīla Prabhupada said that we worship Radha Krishna in the mood of Lakshmi Narayana, because Lakshmi Narayana are worshipped through Vaidhi Bhakti. And if we do so, then gradually rag or spontaneous attachment will awaken in our heart. Prabhupada also installed Jagannath, the Lord of the universe, whose smiling, wide-eyed form reveals the ecstasy of Krishna's separation from his devotees. So it's also a form of Krishna, Vrindavan Krishna, because Vrindavan Krishna is our Ishtadev. Our goal is to achieve Goloka Vrindavan, not any other planet in the spiritual universe. And Jagannath is also a form of Krishna. And he's very dear to us because although he's Krishna outside of Vrindavan, Krishna and Dwarka, but he's remembering Vrindavan. And we also have Lord Chaitanya, who was living in Jagannath Puri half of his life. Thank you. And he was worshipping Jagannath in Jagannath Puri. So Jagannath is very dear to Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And Gaur-Nitai represent the most merciful forms of the Lord. Their worship is very simple and forgiving, and Prabhupada even encouraged that Gaur-Nitai deities be given widely even to newcomers as they bring good fortune and gradually awaken devotion in the people's hearts. So this is a very important principle that if we study Śrīla Prabhupada's instructions, his letters, his books, then he's emphasizing that these forms are worshipped by us. I often hear my Guru Maharaj responding to devotees who express their desire to worship other forms of Krishna, Balaram or Nishingadev or other forms. Some devotees like to worship baby Krishna. What is it? There's a name specific. Bala Krishna, climbing for the Bala Gopal, or Ladu Gopal is also a name. So that these forms of God don't represent the type of love that Lord Chaitanya and Śrīla Prabhupada came to bless us with. So it's very important to understand that which forms of the Lord, if we worship them, evoke that kind of love that Lord Chaitanya came to give us. So Śrīla Prabhupada saw deities not only as objects of temple worship, but also as cultural symbols that could help spread Krishna consciousness more broadly. He actually suggested that Gaura-Nitai deities are put in little boxes and be distributed along with books on the streets to people as auspicious figures or good luck dolls, with some incense to just tell the people to take them home. You just offer an incense daily. Even if they live a simple life, Gaura-Nitai is very forgiving, but because they do this service, maybe chant a Maha Mantra every day, then it will bring them good luck. So this would be Agyata Sukriti, Agyata meaning they have no knowledge of what they are actually doing, but it's so powerful that eventually these people will have their love for Krishna awakened. I'd like to share with you a letter Śrīla Prabhupada wrote to Hanuman Prasad Poddar. He was the head of the Gorakhpur Gita Press publishing house. And this is from a letter to him. Prabhupada says, the deity worshipped in the temples are Jagannath Swami with Balaram and Subhadra and Radha Krishna. When we first start a temple, we start with Jagannath Swami. My Guru Maharaj recommended temples of Jagannath in these countries, so I was inspired to establish first of all Jagannath Swami because he is kind even to the mlechas. Then when there is opportunity, I established Radha Krishna Murti. So generally in all our temples, Jagannath Swami and Lord Chaitanya Saṅkīrtana pictures are invariably there, and gradually we're installing Radha Krishna Murtis in each and every center. So this letter was written in 1970, and when we will see a little history of deities installed in ISKCON, you will see what preceded this letter. So it is worth noting that although the worship of the Archa forms of Chaitanya and Nityananda is simpler and less risky, and here Prabhupada said that worship of Jagannath and Lord Chaitanya precede installing Radha Krishna. Actually, in ISKCON, Radha Krishna deities were installed prior to Lord Chaitanya and Gaura-Nitai. Gaura-Nitai installation came much later, but I will come back to this. The practice of worshipping Radha Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu together in the same temple, like we have, if you've seen the altar in New Vrajadam, now here we only see one section of them, Radhishyam, but if we face the altar, to their left we have a beautiful deity of Lord Chaitanya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gauranath Raj. So this practice was introduced by Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākur in the temples of the Gaudiya Math. And in the ISKCON early days, after installing either Jagannath Baladev Subhadra or Radha Krishna, there was a picture of Lord Chaitanya that was worshipped. It wasn't a deity. Prabhupada wrote to Shyama Sundar in 1967, 21st of May, about sending a drawing for carving Lord Chaitanya and his associates. So Prabhupada himself drew what Lord Chaitanya should look like and sent it to Shyama Sundar Prabhu. Now we know Shyama Sundar Prabhu could carve. He was very good at carving. So he suggested that he makes a deity of Lord Chaitanya, but it never really happened. In 1968, he asked Nathan Baruch in a letter to carve a wooden form of Chaitanya and enclose a drawing, but again, it wasn't realized. So the idea was there, but it didn't happen. In 1969, July, Prabhupada wrote to Shyama Sundar that Chaitanya should be carved from yellow or white, ideally golden yellow, marble. In December 1970, he wrote to Naranarayan and Dina Dayadri to make plaster forms of Lord Chaitanya. It's still not happening, so Prabhupada is writing about it, but it's still not happening in ISKCON. Then in May, in 1971, he wrote to Govinda Dasi expressing his happiness that Gaura-Nitāi deities have finally been completed. And in November of that same year, he confirmed that Govinda Dasi was the one who introduced the worship of Chaitanya's Arcā-vigraha in the Western world. So Prabhupada incorporated ISKCON in 1966, and Gaura-Nitāi deities came in 1971, so 5 years later. Prabhupada rarely diverted from Radha Krishna, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, or Gaura-Nitāi. In 1974 in Vrindavan, Prabhupada installed Krishna Balaram deities. So he argued that there were so many Radha Krishna deities in Vrindavan already, and there was no Krishna Balaram, so he was installing Krishna Balaram, but of course they are on the central altar, but there is also Gaura-Nitāi and Radha Krishna with the Sakis in the Krishna Balaram Mandir. When devotees saw this, they thought, let us install Krishna Balaram as well in our temples. And then Prabhupada wrote a letter. He says, you have asked about Balaram Krishna deities. No, Balaram and Krishna are already there as Chaitanya and Nitai, Vrajendra Nandanaye, Sachisutta Harilasai. The best thing is to establish Gaura-Nitāi deities. In Vrindavan, we are establishing Balaram Krishna deities because most of the temples there have Radha Krishna, and there is not Balaram Krishna. That has a different purpose. We should not imitate that. Better to have Gaura-Nitāi, Radha Krishna, and Lord Jagannath. That system must continue. So Śrīla Prabhupada is, again, emphasizing these forms. He generally did not introduce the worship of other deities unless there was a specific reason for it, just such as when he installed Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan, or when he established the worship of Kaliya Krishna in Fiji. So it's not Radha Krishna, it's Krishna dancing on the hoods of Kaliya. Everyone knows the pastime of Kaliya in Vrindavan? Who hasn't heard the story of Kaliya? So one of the Vrindavan pastimes is Krishna is a young boy, he jumps into the river Yamuna, and there is a snake who is poisoning the water. And this snake comes and twirls around Krishna, and the Brijvasis are terrified that Krishna is going to die. And then, of course, Krishna gets out from the coils of the snake and starts dancing on the heads. So because Prabhupada heard that in Fiji there were snakes, so he suggested that they install Kaliya Krishna deity. It's also noteworthy that in 1976 August, while in France, actually this was the last pair of deities Śrīla Prabhupada personally installed, they were Krishna Balaram deities. Due to the lack of time I had to prepare for this class, unfortunately I don't have illustrations, I just have the quotes, so I apologize for that. But you can look up these beautiful, beautiful deities. According to a 1976 letter from Prabhupada, one of his disciples, Brikshavi, suggested placing the deities of Sitaram, Lakshman, and Hanuman on the altar in Washington, D.C. So until this, there was no Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman on the altar. So they came up with the idea, because it's quite common in India that Sita, Ram, Lakshman, and Hanuman are worshipped together. So interestingly, Śrīla Prabhupada approved of the idea, and the explanation he gave was that since Lord Ram is the ideal king, it is fitting that he should preside in the capital of the United States. So the deities weren't installed in Prabhupada's times, they were installed later in 1981 on the day of Rama Vijayotsava, which we just celebrated a few days ago. Panchatattva deities were also installed in the ISKCON Honolulu Center. I'm focusing on the time period while Prabhupada was here, 1965 to 1977, to see what Prabhupada did. So in Honolulu, Panchatattva was installed, and of course from a theological point of view, the worship of Panchatattva is the same as the worship of Gaura-Nitāi, just the other members of the Panchatattva are also there. And in a letter written in 1968 November, Prabhupada mentioned that when one of his disciples proposed making a deity of Lord Nrisimhadev, half man, half lion form of Krishna, he advised that instead they should depict a picture of Nrisimhadev. And if they wanted to cast deities, it should be Radha and Krishna. That was about the form of the deities, so it's important for us to register that these are the forms that Prabhupada wanted us to worship. Gornitai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, and Radha and Krishna. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Lord Kapila states that the Lord can appear in all these different substances that I've already mentioned, and even within the mind through meditation. So the deity can be made of different materials, and the process of selecting and preparing materials is very, very careful in the ancient tradition. For example, in Jagannath Puri, there is the long-term worship of Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, but I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Navakalevaram ceremony, that regularly the wooden form of Jagannath is changed. So the deities are buried, and the new wooden Jagannath Baladev Subhadra are carved and placed on the altar. It has a beautiful ritual. So it takes weeks and elaborate rituals to find these trees and to carve the deities, to sanctify them and to place them on the altar. And many of Prabhupada's letters show that he ordered Radha Krishna deities for ISKCON temples from India. And these marble deities were usually sent from Jaipur to various parts of the world. Jaipur is one of India's main centers where they carve deities. One of the reasons, because it's surrounded with the finest marble mines. And it's a very high quality marble that's ideal for carving the intricate forms of big marble deities like we have Radhashama Sundar. So most ISKCON's major temples' deities came from Jaipur, although the shipment wasn't always without difficulty, and there are many stories. Sometimes deities broke, and we don't have time, but that's another topic, what happens when deities break. So, according to Prabhupada's instructions, Krishna's form should be carved from either black or white marble, while Radharani should always be white. Of course, the scriptures describe Krishna as the cloud of, the color of a cloud, the rain cloud. And sometimes they say it's like a blue lotus or blue sapphire. But Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura'nın noted that this bluish shade is not a color found in the material world. So we say Krishna is blue, but there's no, I said this last time, no RGB number that you can, this is Krishna's color. It's the eternal, blissful, transcendental variegatedness invisible to the mortal eye, but so that we have a conception of what he may be like, then we have different descriptions. Prabhupada's sannyas Guru Keshava Goswami installed white marble Krishna deities always, only white, all over India. And interestingly, he has a poem I found. It's called Shishirada Vinod Vihari Tattva Ashtaka, where he explains that when Krishna becomes absorbed in the thoughts of separation from Srimati Radharani, his dark color fades and his body shines with a golden hue. So this was his meditation, and therefore he always installed Radha Krishna where Krishna was white. During a Bhagavad Gita lecture in London, Prabhupada mentioned that some people criticize him for installing white Krishna deities, and in response he quoted the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which states that Krishna sometimes appears in a white form. When the Bhagavatam goes through the different ages and the different colors Krishna appears in, we also have the color white. So So although most ISKCON temples in Prabhupada's time installed black Krishna deities, he also personally installed white ones in several places, like in Los Angeles, we have Rukmini Dvarakadisha. And also, of course, in London, he installed Radha Londanishwara. Londanishwara is white marble. Of course, we know that Londanishwara wasn't ordered by Śrīla Prabhupada. That whole beautiful story is there in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, but also in Mumbai, Radharasa Vihari, Krishna is white, and in Chicago, Kishore Kishori, Krishna is white. If we read Prabhupada's letters, so what I did, I went through all the letters and I took out every reference from Śrīla Prabhupada. It's very clear that Prabhupada also explored the possibilities of having deities made in America, both in terms of materials and in craftsmanship. Traditionally, however, carving the deity of Krishna is a sacred art, and there are traditional artisans called shilpikas who carve deities, and they learn their trade. It's a family tradition, so from early childhood they learn the expertise. They have traditional apprenticeship under experienced carvers. Carving the Lord's form from material elements requires not only sculpting skills, not just that you're a good sculpt, but it also needs deep knowledge of Vedic scriptures, especially those related to deity worship. And it also demands ritual purity and devotional consciousness. So it's not like anyone could carve a deity in India. So traditionally, deities are made in specialized workshops that follow strict rules, have long established traditions, and they are generally located in holy places associated with Vaishnava culture, particularly in regions famous for their excellence in religious iconography and craftsmanship. Now, Śrīla Prabhupada, unlike traditional temple standards, did not consider craftsmanship's spiritual qualification as the main criterion for making deities. If someone could carve wood or work with stone, even if they were new to Krishna consciousness, he encouraged them to try making deities. We will see letters where Prabhupada is talking about it, deity installation, very early. But the first time Prabhupada wanted something done in America was in 1966. This is, the story is explained by Brahmananda Prabhu in his book. In New York, Prabhupada made a sketch of Lord Jagannath and gave this sketch to Brahmananda Prabhu, and the 26th 2nd Avenue was across a tomb shop. Tombs, you know, when people die, then on their graves they put the tombs. So they were making out of marble these tombs. So Śrīla Prabhupada made a sketch of Lord Jagannath and planned to have it carved from black granite from the tombs maker across. So Brahmananda Prabhu explains that he was given this drawing. He had no idea what a deity is, what's going on, and he was supposed to go across and tell this man, carve this form. So this is the first time Prabhupada intended something done in the United States. They denied, they didn't do it because they just said they have these ready-made blocks and they just put letters on them. But this is the first time when Prabhupada had this intention. And then in 1967, in March, in San Francisco, Prabhupada asked, remember Mañjarī Devī went to the shop and bought back small little figures of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra Devi, and Prabhupada wanted big deities carved the same shape. So he asked Śyāma-Sundara Prabhu to carve the forms of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And we hear the story that when Śyāma-Sundara Prabhu was carving, sometimes Prabhupada came in to have a look. And then once he came in, on the top of Jagannath's head, there was a box of cigarettes. So you see how important deity worship, introducing deity worship was to Śrīla Prabhupada. He didn't wait until Śyāma-Sundara Prabhu became a pure qualified Brahmana, and he wasn't sent to India to learn the art. it was so urgent that we start doing deity worship. It's very, very interesting. In early 1968, Prabhupada happily noted that a sculptor named Bob had joined the New York temple. He was very happy. Oh wow, here's a sculptor. And he instructed Brahmananda Prabhu to have him carve a 60 centimeter high Radha Krishna pair from wood. New devotee, minimal understanding of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada told him to carve a deity. A few days later, he wrote again asking whether Bob had proper tools or casting experience, since he wanted to produce about 100 deities, possibly from durable rubber. So rubber is not listed among the materials in the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada was very practical, and he was very much emphasizing that we have these forms of Krishna and we start to worship them. Whatever it takes. So here is this young devotee, and Prabhupada says, I want 100 deities. So he wanted many, many deities so devotees can worship them. That March, he wrote to Michael O'Leary, a sculptor's apprentice, asking him to carve a wooden Radha Krishna pair. In another letter, the same month, he mentioned that his disciple Gaura Sundar had made a Radha Krishna sculpture which they were trying to cast in brass in Los Angeles, hoping to begin mass production. It wasn't easy to bring deities from India and from Jaipur to the West. So Prabhupada was looking for ways, how could we produce our deities here? By August, Prabhupada wrote, it's very interesting to go through these letters, so much comes out of them. Sometimes we hear that the letters are not so important because Prabhupada's books are the essence and letters are time, place, circumstance, but historically so much knowledge can be gained if we look at these letters. So by August, Prabhupada wrote to a new woodcarver, Nathan Baruch, instructing him to make a 60 centimeter Krishna from ebony and a slightly smaller Radha from golden colored hardwood, as well as a 60 centimeter Chaitanya deity. And Prabhupada sent his own hand-drawn design, what the deity should look like. Later that year, Prabhupada praised a devotee called Chandravali for her hand-carved and painted Jagannath deities, saying that every temple would need such archa forms. He also wrote to Yamuna, mentioning that a disciple named Naranarayana was experimenting with casting bronze deities. In early 1969, he urged Naranarayan to make plaster Radha Krishna deities, modeled after those that were made in New York. And 2 weeks later, he wrote to Murari that Naranarayan was again trying to make brass forms, though soon they might be able to import deities from India. In 1971 letter, Prabhupada warned that Jagannath deities should not be purchased for large sums of money, they should always be carved locally. He says, this is a word-for-word quote from the letter, any boy who knows how to carve can make Jagannath. Again, so there is the tradition, but this is Prabhupada's implementation. In 1973, he wrote to Govinda Dasi, happy to hear that a new workshop had opened in Kauai to make Gornitai deities, but cautioned her to always consult him before sending deities to any temple, since Arcā-vigraha worship is not a whimsical matter. He didn't want installation to take place if there weren't enough trained pujaris. In 1974, he gave permission to Madhava Devi to cast Gornitai deities from clay in Paris into plaster. And he also instructed a devotee called Kalachanda, these are all in letters, to produce Panchatattva deities from cement or plaster, modeled after the Los Angeles Gornitai. So we can go on and on, look at these letters. We have a remembrance from Govinda Dasi where she's saying that she started with plaster molds and then she used hydrostone. It's a kind of cement. And finally, she made paper mache deities. I often hear from my Guru Maharaj that he was in different temples where they were worshipping Gornitai out of paper mache. Quite incredible. So from these letters, it is clear that Prabhupada did not rigidly insist on ritual, technical qualification for the maker of the deity. He always emphasized what truly mattered, the essence of the tradition, that someone's sincere, and they follow what he says, what the deity should look like. Now, if you look at the installation of the deity, originally there are so many scriptures that are describing in great detail ceremonies. They take days and days of preparation and mantras and utensils, things that are needed. The term for this ceremony is prana pratishtha. When deities are installed, prana means life air or life energy, and pratishtha means establishing or installing. Literally, prana pratishtha means placing the life force into the deity, so inviting the Lord's living presence. So there is this material elements, and then we invite the living force. So it's a ritual how this is done. So in my research, and in my book, I'm going through. I reviewed all the installation in which Śrīla Prabhupada personally took place. So I went chronologically. One of the reasons why Prabhupada traveled the world was to install deities. So I go through one by one. Where did he go? Who did he install? And what was the installation ceremony? So in the early days of ISKCON, the process of deity installation was quite simple compared to the traditional Vedic system. Prabhupada considered a deity installed as soon as it was placed on the altar. Someone offered lamb, some food, and the devotees chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That was enough, because the essence was devotion. Of course, his presence was very, very important. Now we had this initiation ceremony, beautiful ceremony, fire yagya, so many mantras chanted by Brahmanas. And then Shyamagori was singing the kirtan, and Maharaj was saying that this kirtan, this is initiation. Everything else is a decoration. So this is the most important part. So Prabhupada also viewed it this way about installing deities. Of course, over time, as the movement grew, the standards both of installation and daily worship became more and more refined, and Prabhupada described the traditional high standards expected in temple worship, how the 64 upacharas are to be offered, and he also inspired devotees to write deity worship books. But he balanced tradition with practicality. He adjusted according to time, place, and circumstance. When the Krishna Balaram temple was opened in Vrindavan, he arranged for local Brahmins to perform a full 3-day installation ceremony so that the local people would view these ISKCON deities as properly installed. But at the same time, in a purport in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Prabhupada writes, recently, when we established the large Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, we were obliged to have Vedic ceremonies enacted by Brahmanas, because the inhabitants of Vrindavan, especially the smarta Brahmanas, would not accept Europeans and Americans as bona fide Brahmanas. So we know he didn't mind, even if someone still smoked, to carve the deity. Of course, eventually he expected Brahmanas to come to certain standards of purification and lifestyle. But Europeans and Americans were not excluded, as in the eyes of many in India. Only people who were born in Brahmin families were qualified to worship the deity. So he didn't want people to think that these deities are not properly installed. So he says, thus we had to engage Brahmanas to perform costly yagyas. In spite of these yagyas, the members of our society performed Saṅkīrtana loudly with mridangas, and I consider the Saṅkīrtana more important than the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Both the ceremonies and the Saṅkīrtana were going on simultaneously. The ceremonies were meant for persons interested in Vedic rituals, for elevation to heavenly planets. Jani Krita Matir Madhupushpitayam. Whereas the Saṅkīrtana was meant for pure devotees interested in pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We would simply have performed Saṅkīrtana, but then the inhabitants of Vrindavan would not have taken the installation ceremony seriously. As explained here, the Vedic performances are meant for those whose intelligence has been dulled by the flowery language of the Vedas, which describe fruitive activities intended to elevate one to the higher planets. Especially in this age of Kali, Saṅkīrtana alone is sufficient. If the members of our temples in the different parts of the world simply continue Saṅkīrtana before the deity, especially before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they will remain perfect. There is no need of any other performances. And he continues, nevertheless, to keep oneself clean in habits and mind, deity worship and other regulative principles are required. Srila Jiva Goswami says that although Saṅkīrtana is sufficient for the perfection of life, the archana or worship of the deity in the temple must continue in order that the devotees may stay clean and pure. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura'nın therefore recommended that one follow both processes simultaneously. We strictly follow this principle of performing deity worship and Saṅkīrtana along parallel lines. This we should continue. This explanation clearly shows how Śrīla Prabhupada captured the essence of scriptures regarding the installation and worship of the deities, and always keeping the ultimate purpose in mind. What's the ultimate purpose of worshipping the deity?
Going to higher planets.
Not going to higher planets, but to?
Awaken the dormant love.
Yes, to awaken the dormant love of God in our heart. This is the purpose of deity worship. It's not that I join a club where other people do this. It's not so that I can show off. It's not so that I can spend money in a good way. There is the Cheshta Rupa and Bhava Rupa, remember? There's the external activities, but they all have a purpose, that internally something happens in our heart, that we actually identify as servants of Krishna, and that this love of Krishna develops in our heart. So, Rupa Goswami defines archana or deity worship as offering various items to the deity with mantras after one has performed proper purificatory processes. So after purifying ourselves, bathing, so purifying the body, and with mantras, we purify the mind. With meditation, we identify ourselves as servants of Krishna before we approach the Lord. So there are prayers that we say, Lord Chaitanya said, Naham Vipro, Nashnarapatir, Napi Vaishya, Shudro, Naham Varni, Nachrihapatir, Novanasya, Tirva, Kintu, Projan, Dikira Paramananda Puda, Vikrabde, Gopi Pardur, Padakamalero, Dasa, Dasa, Nudasa. Before we approach the deity, we chant this mantra to remind ourselves that we are not Shudras, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, or Brahmanas. We are not any of the ashrams, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi. We are not the mother of this and this child. We're not the wife of this and this person, or the husband of this and this person. We are servants of Krishna. This is my identity when I approach him. We have our temporary identities, which are also important to live those roles in the world. But when we approach the Lord and when we serve the Lord, it's very important to remind ourselves of our eternal identity. Now, ISKCON's main guidebook on deity worship is called Pancharatra Pradipa, and it's based on Pancharatra texts, and it organizes all aspects of deity worship into 5 categories. So the first one is called Abhigamana, which means preparing to approach the deity. So here come these purificatory things that we've mentioned: bathing, wearing clean clothes, applying tilak, putting on tulsi beads, cleaning and decorating the temple. This is also considered deity worship. So even if someone doesn't have second initiation, doesn't directly offer an arti or boga or dress the deities, we can also take part of deity worship by this aspect. Then there is upadana, which means gathering items for worship. So someone goes and picks the flowers that we will offer to the Lord, or someone goes to the market and brings the ingredients for cooking, or we're picking tulsi leaves, or someone makes sure that the financial and practical means of worship are there. We collect donations so that we can buy the bhoga, etc. All these services are part of deity worship. So it's very important to know that how much daily worship is interwoven into our lives as devotees, how Śrīla Prabhupada planned everything. Yoga means internal preparation. So this is what I was saying, remembering the spiritual master and the Lord through meditation and mantras. There are many mantras that we're chanting to prepare our consciousness to approach the Lord. And then there is ijya, the actual worship, when we bathe the deity, we dress the deity, we decorate the deity, we offer bhoga to the deity. And an element of deity worship is svadhyaya, or studying scripture and maintaining other practices of Vaishnava sadhana. These are all connected and part of deity worship. So deity worship is a formal and regulated expression of reverence and service. I'm just looking at how much time we have and what to speak on. Okay, so if we go to the topic of deities personally installed by Śrīla Prabhupada, it's very, very interesting. Between 1967 and 77, so Prabhupada arrived in 65 September 19, and the first deity was installed in 67. So between 67 and 77, Prabhupada personally installed numerous deities. I will give you the list. There is one slide where you can see. And as I said, it was one of the purposes of his travels to install deities worldwide. And although he did not want his followers to become overly absorbed in complicated rituals. So this is also very important. Sometimes we have the tendency that, okay, deity worship is important, deity worship is emphasized, and then we get into so complicated things that takes many, many hours of the day, and then we don't have time to chant rounds and do other services. So this was not Prabhupada's intention. So he made a plan that the deity is the center of the temple, the center of the home, the center of our attention, so that we can become Krishna conscious, but it doesn't mean neglecting other things. So he didn't want complicated rituals. Even before ISKCON was officially registered, Prabhupada had already expressed his intention of introducing deity worship in the United States. So the first letter I found was in 1966 January. He wrote a letter to Bon Maharaj, one of his godbrothers in India, about installing Radha Krishna deities. And in that letter he mentioned his plan to open the first Radha Krishna temple in New York, and inquired about the cost of obtaining deities. So we are 1966 January, before ISKCON was founded. So Prabhupada is still living in, I'm not sure, 66 January, either with Dr. Mishra or in the office or in Carl Jürgen's apartment. He's writing this letter. So let's see what this letter says. So Prabhupada says, so he doesn't have any followers yet. No, I mean, even when he founded ISKCON, you know, there was just international society, but it was just a little gang of people who were hanging around him in 26 2nd Avenue. So we're half a year before that. So Prabhupada says, temple idea is prompted in me because I feel that Śrīla Prabhupada, meaning Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura'nın, wanted to open some temples in the foreign countries. Personally, I have no aptitude to open temples, neither I have done it in India, although there were many great opportunities. But here, see there is necessity even from the point of Hindu cultural view. There is not a single Hindu temple here, at least in New York, or all the places so far I have traveled in this country. this is not an ordinary temple of worship, but it is an international institution for God consciousness based on the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So Prabhupada is already talking about an international institution based on the Bhagavatam, not ordinary temple worship, because what does the Bhagavatam say? It establishes that the supreme form of the Lord is Sri Krishna. So deity worship was a means to achieve ISKCON's ultimate purpose, to help the members become God conscious. And Prabhupada says it's based on the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam talks about Krishna and talks about Vrindavan and talks about Krishna's eternal associates, specifically, although not mentioned by name, but we understand the concept, especially with the help of our acharyas, the worship of Radha and Krishna. So this was the first letter. In 1966, April, he wrote a letter to Sumati Morarji, who bought his ticket to travel to the West. And he wrote that he was ready to begin setting up a temple and start the worship of Radha and Krishna deities, even in the small loft at 72nd Street on the Bowery in New York, which served as his residence. So he was, maybe you remember from the Lilamrita, he was sharing the loft with another boy, and he had like, a loft means like a huge area, and he had one corner with a curtain separated for him, and he wanted to install Radha Krishna deities there. And you can notice he's not saying Gaura-Nitai, he's always saying Radha Krishna, because he wanted it to be very clear that our goal is Goloka Vrindavan and worshipping Radha and Krishna. Gaura-Nitai is the means. We go through Gaura-Nitai. They are the path. They help us to reach Radha Krishna. But what did Lord Chaitanya teach? We worship Lord Chaitanya. What did he teach? That you worship Radha Krishna. And Maharaj was making this point that, yes, the Panchatattva Mahamantra is so powerful, but Lord Chaitanya told us to chant Hare Krishna. So worshipping Gaura-Nitai is very powerful, but Lord Chaitanya taught us to worship Radha and Krishna. So this was in April, and then 2 months later, the ISKCON's founding document was drafted, where Prabhupada spoke about the purposes of ISKCON, and I've already mentioned this, that he was speaking about Radha Krishna worship. I already mentioned that after this, the first time when Prabhupada made the drawing and sent this drawing with Brahmananda Prabhu, that was in 1967, and the first half-meter tall Krishna statue owned by ISKCON appeared in San Francisco. This is also in the Lilamrita Kartami Shai. Prabhupada gave this name, the boss. This is the name of the deity just alone. And then 67 February came Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. And then gradually, many other deities were installed in ISKCON. So I'm running out of time, so I don't want to be late, and I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions. But I would like to share with you the list. So we spoke about Kartami Shai, and then Jagannath Baladev installed in San Francisco. We remember the story. And then they were also installed in New York. And then the first Radha Krishna deities were installed, small deities, as Rukmini Dwarkadish in Los Angeles. So here you can see the list of all the deities that Śrīla Prabhupada personally installed. So he traveled to these places. And then the first big marble deities was Radha Landonishvara. So Rukmini Dwarkadish were small, but they that was where Prabhupada introduced a serious standard of deity worship. In San Francisco, when Jagannath Baladev Subhadra was installed, we read in the Lilamrita how they just brought in the buckets, placed it in front of Jagannath. That was how they made the offering. There was no separate plate. How they did the arti, there was a plate with lights, and then they just passed it one person to the next person. It wasn't like, hey, this was already offered. The next person offered the same lamb. So the standard of deity worship wasn't very high. And we get these letters how Prabhupada kept writing that he's 20 pairs of Radha Krishna deities, and it's always Radha Krishna deities. He also had the fixed height, either 45 centimeter or 51 centimeter, 18 inch or 20 inch tall deities that he was ordering. But these were the deities Prabhupada actually installed, and we see how many are Radha Krishna deities here. We have a few Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, and Gaur-Nitai. Kishore Kishori is also, of course, Radha Krishna, and I mentioned the specialty of Krishna Balaram and Kaliya Krishna. There is a whole story of Krishna Balaram in New Mayapur, but we don't have time for that. But I hope once it will be published in the book, then you can read it. But I would like to share with you a last quote. And the reason is because Prabhupada, as the founder of ISKCON, established a remarkable balance between tradition and innovation. So I was telling you how flexible he was about the person who was carving the deities, about the material. He really wanted the deities to be made in the United States, not anywhere else. So while preserving the purity and the essence of Gaudiya Vaishnava heritage, he simultaneously adapted its practice to suit his Western audience. So, Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada had a pragmatic approach, and his extensive global travels enabled ISKCON members around the world to participate in the central aspects of Vaishnava devotional life, deity worship. But this quote that I want to show you, ending the class with, is showing the Desha Kala Patra principle, which means place, time, and circumstance. And it's a concept found throughout Vaishnava scriptures. When commenting on Narada Muni's mention of this principle in connection with deity worship in the Bhagavatam, comes this quote in Śrīla Prabhupāda's purport. So, Prabhupada says, the method of worship, chanting the mantra and preparing the forms of the Lord, is not stereotyped, nor is it exactly the same everywhere. It is specially mentioned in this verse that one should take consideration of the time, place, and available conveniences. Our Krishna consciousness movement is going on throughout the entire world, and we also install deities in different centers. Sometimes our Indian friends, puffed up with concocted notions, criticize. This has not been done, that has not been done. But they forget this instruction of Narada Muni to one of the greatest Vaishnavas, Dhruva Maharaj. One has to consider the particular time, country, and conveniences. What is convenient in India may not be convenient in the Western countries. Am I still? Yes. Those who are not actually in the line of acharyas, or who personally have no knowledge of how to act in the role of acharya, unnecessarily criticize the activities of the ISKCON movement in countries outside of India. Prabhupada continues, the fact is that such critics cannot do anything personally to spread Krishna consciousness. If someone does go and preach, taking all risks and allowing all considerations for time and place, it might be that there are changes in the manner of worship, but that is not at all faulty, according to Shastra. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Acharya, an Acharya in the disciplic succession of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, has remarked in his commentary that Chandalas, or conditioned souls who are born in lower Shudra families, can also be initiated according to circumstances. The formalities might be slightly changed here and there to make them Vaishnavas. So I put in a few pictures of Prabhupada doing daily worship. I didn't have the time to make all these previous slides very colorful, but I hope the message was deep and meaningful. And we see how much Śrīla Prabhupada wanted daily worship to happen in the Western countries, how much it was his meditation from the very early days, 1966 January, installing Radha Krishna deities in the loft without any followers, without any pujaris, and how this evolved over the years. So here we see Śrīla Prabhupada fanning deities with a peacock fan, and Prabhupada offering arti. This is the installation of Radha Paris Ishvara. There's a beautiful video of this also on YouTube. If you look for installation of Radha Paris Ishvara, you can see the whole beautiful procedure and how Śrīla Prabhupada is present, and how everyone, because of how Prabhupada treated the deities, had this understanding that this is Krishna here personally. This is the installation of Krishna Balaram in an arti to Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan. So thank you so very much for your kind attention. And despite of my efforts, we ran out of time. So if anyone wants to ask questions, then feel free to come to me. We will start Kirtan now, right?
No, it's for dinner now.
Oh, dinner. Okay. So,
7.
It's prasadam time. I don't want to take the opportunity to eat. What I can offer is that please feel free to go and take prasadam, and those who would like to ask questions, then you may come and I will be here, and I'm happy to respond to your questions. Okay? Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you very, very, very much for the translators. I know how much effort it is. You've helped me so much by giving me this extra time, by doing the simultaneous translation over your service. Thank you very much. Jai Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Satpuj Mahaprabhu Gauritai Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Grace Manjari Mataji ki.
Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.